Welcome to the Inside Elections podcast, where we analyze elections in a nonpartisan, data-driven, and accessible way. In this episode, we're doing a deep dive into the fight for the Senate, including the 4 most important states in the battle for the majority, states where primaries will have a big impact, and we'll unveil our brand new race ratings. Buckle up. I'm Nathan Gonzales, editor and publisher of Inside Elections, the go-to place for nonpartisan analysis for more than 40 years. I am headed to Oregon's 6th district in the Willamette Valley, represented by Democrat Andrea Salinas, to visit my family and where my kids can play my old Sega Genesis.
I'm Jacob Rubashkin, deputy editor of Inside Elections, and later this week I am headed out to the sunny shores of Delaware and the at-large congressional district there, which is currently represented by Democrat Sarah McBride.
Before we get into the Senate analysis, let's do some other election news. Jacob, kick us off.
Republican Mike Lawler announced today that he will not run for governor after all in New York. Reversal that comes after the Hudson Valley congressman has been teasing a bid for governor for over a year, really. His decision clears the way for Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, who is the representative of New York's North Country, to secure the Republican nomination next year in what is sure to be an uphill battle against incumbent Democrat Kathy Hochul.
So this is great news for House Republicans because Lawler had vacated that seat. That would have been a difficult hold and still a challenging race for him, but much better chance for Republicans with him running.
Yeah.
In Arizona, in the 7th district, the Democratic special primary to replace the late Raul Grijalva is done. It took place, and it was won by his daughter, Adelita Grijalva, it ended up being not as dramatic as what it could have been. She won with 62% over influencer Deja Fox at 21% and former state representative Daniel Hernandez at 14%. She was, as Jacob, as you wrote multiple times, she was the wire-to-wire front runner, but it got a little more attention than usual after the mayoral primary and just the general the New York City mayoral primary and the general narrative about outsiders, influencers, young people, progressives, challenging establishment-ish figures. But it ended up, this race kind of played along the typical factors mattered. And the special general election isn't until September when Grijalva will win and be sworn in soon after that. But that race is almost done.
Yeah, sometimes the most obvious outcome is the one that we get. And in this case, the progressive daughter of the former congressman, well-liked, endorsed by every major political figure in the state and progressives nationwide, and ended up winning. Who would have thought? In Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania Professional Firefighters Association President Bob Brooks is gearing up for a run as a Democrat in the 7th district in the Lehigh Valley against freshman Republican Ryan McKenzie. Brooks is a 20-year veteran of the Bethlehem Fire Department, and he'll be the 4th Democrat in the race to challenge McKenzie, joining Northampton County Executive Lamont McClure, former Energy Executive Carol Obando Durstein, and former federal prosecutor Ryan Crosswell.
And you were ahead of the curve on this, right? If people who are following Jacob got this news already, but great job, Jacob.
Yes, this is a scoop, Inside Elections exclusive,
a legit one, not some of these breaking with 5 sirens. That's not really new. So great job, Jacob. Now, in Tennessee, Republican Congressman Mark Green resigned his seat. He represented in the 7th district, which is Middle Tennessee. He says he has another job lined up, and that you can find more information about that otherwise. But the point is that the House, after the 2024 elections, was 220 For Republicans, 215. For Democrats, it is actually now 219 because of Greene's resignation, and 212 because of 3 deaths of Democratic lawmakers. We talked about the one in Arizona. There's also Virginia and Texas special elections to fill those seats. But in Tennessee, the special primary is set for August 7th, and the general election is December 2nd. Trump won the district 60 to 38%, so the primary will be the most important race, but Speaker Mike Johnson is down another vote until that seat is filled.
Yeah, and in a sign of perhaps Democratic enthusiasm, I believe there are a number of Democrats who have already either formally announced or expressed interest in running in that special election. So any of them would surely be the real underdog against whoever wins the Republican primary, but clearly in a state, in a district that has really been difficult for the party, there's at least some interest in taking a free shot at a seat in Congress later this year.
Yep, you can't win if you don't run. That's my wisdom for today. No, stick around. We're gonna have Senate wisdom next. In 2026, the Senate and the House are on the line. The path for Democrats to regain the Senate is a little bit tougher than the House. Democrats need a net gain of 4 seats to get to 51 seats. And just looking at the map, the Republicans are the early favorites to hold the majority, even if the midterm gets a little bit rocky. Now, up to this point, we've had 2 different ratings. 2 rating choices. We've had either the races are rated as solid or battleground. This week we are moving to our typical 9 category system where there are toss-ups and tilts and leans and likelies and solids. And so we're going to walk through what our new ratings are. And even though Republicans and Democrats they disagree on a lot of things these days, there's agreement on what the core 4 states are, the 4 states that make up the middle of the Senate battleground. Let's start with North Carolina because it's been in the news recently. Republican Senator Tom Tillis is not running for re-election. And drum roll, this is one of our toss-up states. Jacob, what is some of the most, start with the Democratic side. What do we expect on the Democratic side? The following segment was recorded on Wednesday, before the news that Roy Cooper will jump into the race next week, and before the news that Laura Trump will not run and President Trump will support Michael Whatley instead. Enjoy.
Now, this is the toss-up-iest toss-up, and it's one that Democrats...
Is that an official category? You just created another category?
Exactly, yeah, true. Toss-up-iest toss-up. That'll be next April Fools. North Carolina is a must-win for Democrats. This is a seat that they lost in 2014. They tried hard to get back in 2020 to no avail, and now have a very good shot at it. This is the first time that North Carolina has had a Senate race in a midterm election with a Republican president since 2002. And of course, that midterm was its own unique situation. And it's a really great opportunity for Democrats. With the open seat, it would have been a good opportunity without the open seat either. At the moment, though, we're still in a bit of a holding pattern, waiting for former Governor Roy Cooper to make his decision about whether or not he wants to run for this seat. If he does run, he would likely clear the field. He would be the Democratic nominee. He'd be able to raise a ton of money, but he is holding his cards close to the vest. In the meantime, only one candidate has actually jumped in the race. That's former Congressman Wiley Nickel, but he's expected to drop out if Roy Cooper does get in. If Cooper doesn't decide to get in, I think Wiley will continue to run, and we'll see other candidates take a look at it as well. The Lieutenant Governor Rachel Hunt, the former CDC Administrator Mandy Cohen, EPA Administrator Michael Regan. There are any number of Democrats who have been rising stars at one point or another in the North Carolina party that may take a look at that race, but only if Cooper elects not to run.
And we've been led to believe that Cooper is likely to run. I think at this stage, if Cooper doesn't run, it would be a surprise. But until he officially, releases that video and says those words, you have to there's always an opportunity for him to not do that. The Republican side, Tillis drops out, and everyone actually looked to President Donald Trump, not because he's running, but because his endorsement is really what matters in most primaries. And right now, the focus is on his daughter-in-law, Laura Trump. Now, she was born in North Carolina, went to NC State, but hasn't spent much of any of her adult life in the state, but she is kind of being given right of first refusal because Trump has said that she would be good and has said nice things about her. But Laura Trump said recently that she could wait until Thanksgiving to decide. Now, that kind of puts Republicans in a box or a potential jam that if she waits all the way till Thanksgiving, that only leaves until the December filing deadline to get another candidate to get ramped up. In the meantime, Governor Cooper could have a 5-month head start. It's also complicated because there is a residency requirement in North Carolina that she would actually have to reestablish residency by September 20th in order to be eligible to file as a candidate. So we might get an early indication of what she's thinking. If she doesn't run, the next person that will get attention is RNC Chairman Michael Whatley, who is a North Carolina native and is well regarded both in Trump world and for his work at the RNC. If he doesn't run, then there are a number of members of the House delegation or other Republicans that would take a look. But this is one of the emerging swing states, open seat. There's almost all the ingredients for a big race in next year.
I think it's fair to say North Carolina has emerged as a swing state. Has been for a while. I think this question about Laura Trump and the primary is really, it's really illustrative to me of where the Republican Party is at this moment in time. We've talked ever since 2018 about the importance of a Trump endorsement, but the reality is I think there's never been a more important time to have Trump's endorsement. To illustrate that, the Speaker of the North Carolina State House, Destin Hall, who holds the job that Thom Tillis once held before he was elected to the Senate, when Tillis announced that he wasn't going to run again, Destin Hall tweeted out, he said, "The Senate race is too important to be derailed by a messy, divisive primary. We must unify behind whoever President Trump picks and send a conservative fighter to D.C. Let's get to work and defeat the Democrats." So dispelling any notion. Yeah, exactly. It's like it actually doesn't matter who the voters want. What matters is picking who Trump picks, whoever that may be, even if it's his daughter-in-law who hasn't lived in the state in a very, very long time. So this is perhaps dangerous ground for Republicans, not the least of which, Nathan, like you mentioned, that she could freeze the field until Thanksgiving when she says she'll make her decision. If she doesn't run, that means that whomever does run is going to be playing catch up to Roy Cooper, assuming that he really does get in sometime in the next couple of weeks. And if she does run, I think she comes in with a fair degree of vulnerability and no proven political ability certainly as a candidate. So a risky choice for Republicans, but one that they have essentially opted into given her relationship to the president.
And if we put this in context of the larger picture, Democrats basically have to win every competitive race and some that are not even competitive right now. So this is a must win. And there are questions. Cooper, fact check me on this, Jacob. I believe he's 67 years old.
Sounds about right.
He is not the youngest candidate. There has been some challenges with Democratic governors moving to the Senate. The big difference, though, for this is that North Carolina is much more competitive than some of the other states where Democratic governors try to make the jump, like Bullock in Montana or something like that. But let's move. So that was one of the top Republican defensive seats. Let's move to a Democratic defensive seat, the open seat in Michigan.
An all-American story. Public schools, high school football captain, scooped ice cream, loved his Camaro, lacrosse at U of M, an academic scholarship to med school, Michigan values, and a life of service to Michigan. His name? Abdul El Sayed.
I remember being handed the keys to my first car. I'm Haley Stevens, and I bet you do too. That used Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme It meant more to me than just freedom. It meant I had a piece of Michigan. You know, the Michigan that helped build this country. The Michigan that shaped me. It's not just what I sound like. It's who I am.
Jacob, put the lay of the land. This is also, we have this rated as a toss-up. I unveil that there. What are we looking at?
Yeah, so there was actually some breaking news about that today. We got a little bit of clarity on the Republican side of the aisle. Former Congressman Mike Rogers has been the only candidate in the race since things got going. He was the Republican nominee in 2024, lost a narrow election to Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin, even as Trump carried Michigan narrowly at the top of the ticket. He's back for another shot at a Senate seat. And he got some welcome news today when Congressman Bill Huizenga, who represents Western Michigan in the House, said that he would not, in fact, pursue the Republican nomination. Huizenga had been staffing up for a potential statewide campaign. He was actually raising more money than Rogers, even though he was only ostensibly running for or raising for his House district as opposed to a statewide campaign, and making a lot of noises. But he was subject of a serious pressure campaign by Senate Republican leadership, as well as perhaps the White House or people in Trump's orbit, to get him to stay in Congress and not complicate Rogers' path to the nomination. So clarity on the Republican side, uncertainty on the Democratic side. You've got 4 candidates currently in the race, 3 of whom I think have a realistic shot of winning the nomination. Congresswoman Haley Stevens, who represents the Detroit suburbs, State Senator Mallory McMorrow, who comes from a similar area, and physician Abdul El-Sayed, who has held various posts in Detroit proper and Wayne County in the health departments, and who ran for governor back in 2018. Those are the 3 candidates who have raised a significant amount of money, have demonstrated bases of support. There's a 4th candidate in the race, Joe Tate, who's a state representative from Detroit, who served as the Speaker of the State House, but he's really struggled to raise money or gain any sort of traction.
Yeah. And I think there's a bias. It feels like there might be a bias toward Haley Stevens because in DC, because she's a member of Congress and she is maybe the most known. And then McMorrow made a name for herself with a speech on the floor of the state legislature where she kind of countered some attacks that were being leveled at her in a let's say succinct isn't the right word, but in a very pointed, direct way that just Democrats don't usually talk in that way. But then there's El-Sayed, who may be filling this appetite that we're seeing early on from some Democratic primary voters for a more progressive candidate. And so I want to make sure that we, in our coverage, we're watching like the full scope of the field, because even though El-Sayed is not from Washington, I think is going to be a serious player in this race.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. You've got 3 candidates who all have paths to victory. I think anyone who kind of counts out Abdul El-Sayed as a viable candidate is not doing a full analysis of the race. This is a guy who he's young, but he's been around. He ran against Gretchen Whitmer back in 2018 and won about 35% of the vote then. He was endorsed by Bernie Sanders and AOC that time. They're back on his team, or at least Bernie Sanders is on his team for this election. He actually outraised Stevens in the first fundraising quarter that he was in the race. And yeah, I think that he is trying to tap into a anti-establishment vein in the Democratic Party that has proved fruitful elsewhere. But certainly in Washington, D.C., I think Stevens, simply because she's known as a member of Congress and she has ground out these 3 very high-profile, tough elections in 2018 and 2020 in the general election when she represented a swing seat, and then a very expensive Democratic primary against colleague Andy Levin when they were drawn into the same district in 2022. So, the thing that I like to stress about this race is we are more than a year away from the primary. Michigan has an early August primary. There is a lot of time for things to develop in this race. We are still very, very early, and we'll see how things play out. But this is a must win for Democrats. They have to hold this seat in order to maintain their majority. And they like to say, if you talk to any Democrats about this race, they'll say, Republicans haven't won a Senate race in Michigan since, what is it, 1994, whenever Spencer Abraham won his final term before, or only term before Senator Stabenow beat him. But, we know that those streaks exist until they don't.
Right.
Democrat hadn't been elected to a Senate race in Alabama until Doug Jones did it in 2017. These are there are no hard and fast rules in politics. And just because something hasn't happened in the past doesn't mean that it can't happen in the future.
Yeah, I got a kick out of the Republicans loved it when McMorrow and El Sayed outraised Haley Stevens when you didn't count the transfer from her House committee, but they didn't immediately release Mike Rogers' fundraising, which was not great, particularly for how much support. Almost everyone on the Republican side in DC, except for the president, has lined up behind Mike Rogers, and his fundraising was not amazing.
And that's a recurring theme. I mean, he struggled with fundraising last time as well. And one of the major arguments that Republicans have made in his favor this time around is he's going to do better on fundraising, right? He's going to raise more money. He's not going to have to deal with a primary. And so I think, it still remains to be seen. We're very early, but if Rogers wants to turn things around from last time, he really is going to have to step up the fundraising. That remains an issue for him,
and that he'll get more outside support because it is higher on the target list. But if you are listening to this and you take a drink every time we say Democrat, it's a must win for Democrats. You'll either be well hydrated or drunk, depending on what you are drinking. But Michigan, the key, here's a shocking news. I talked about wisdom. The key to gaining seats or having a net gain of seats is you have to first hold your own seats because if Democrats win Michigan, that's only breaking even. That's not gaining anything. No. Along those similar lines, Democrats are defending in Georgia.
This race is already garnering national attention.
Jon Ossoff is running for re-election. The field of Republicans could be growing.
And Congressman Mike Collins, he loves this state.
Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff is up for re-election after a brief break of not having a race, and that race rating is a toss-up. Let's talk about Ossoff is running. He's raising a ton of money. We know what's happening there. The Republican side, Governor Brian Kemp is not running, but what else? So what does that Republican field look like?
Well, at the moment, there are two candidates in the race. Congressman Buddy Carter, who represents Savannah, Georgia, and the southeastern part of the state. He is in the race. He is fundraising. He is writing himself a significant personal check for, I believe, $2 million in the last 3 months. He is joined by State Insurance Commissioner John King, who is also a retired Major General in the Army. And those two make up the field at the moment. But we anticipate that Congressman Mike Collins from kind of northeast Georgia, essentially, Athens area, is going to join imminently. He put out a video the other day, all but declaring his candidacy, and reportedly has been making all sorts of calls to various allies to shore up support ahead of a run. He is a political Nepo baby. He's the son of former Congressman Mac Collins, who held that seat or a similar one about 20 years ago, and who ran unsuccessfully for the Republican Senate nomination in 2004, I want to say, losing to future Senator Johnny Isakson.
Now, Kemp's allies are lining up or potentially pushing another candidate in the race. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so, this is the latest wild card in Senate races, and that is former Tennessee Volunteers football coach Derek Douly, who is being encouraged to run in Georgia by some allies of Governor Brian Kemp. Look, I mean, we know that a football coach can get elected to the Senate. We've seen it happen in Alabama. However, that Senator, Tommy Tuberville, at least coached in Alabama and had a successful career at Auburn. He, of course, left in the middle of the night, but we won't go there. The thing about Derek Douly...
You did go there.
Well, so Derek Douly's much more famous and successful father, if I'm not being too mean to say that, is Vince Douly, who is a legend at the University of Georgia, led the Bulldogs to a national championship and many SEC titles. And he, is no longer with us, but he is the guy who I think they would want to be cashing in on by running Derek Douly. I don't know if he'll get in or not. There seem to be plenty of mixed signals there. And I think that if he does get in, he is not going to scare away some of these other contenders in the race. I mean, you've got well-funded candidates already and I don't think we're looking at like a Herschel Walker situation in 2022 that he was able to just clear the field of anyone serious who tried to get in his way.
Yeah, and I believe that Douly's mother ran for Congress in 2002, lost in a primary to Max Burns in what Max Burns ended up winning the general election in a kind of a famous or infamous race, depending on what side of the aisle you're on, about redistricting and Champ Walker and a basket of chicken fingers. But someone will correct me in the comments, but the Douleys, this is not the first entry into politics for the Douleys. And I need to plug our friend and Inside Elections alum, Jessica Taylor, who's now at the Cook Political Report, who is a daughter of East Tennessee, Elizabethton, and she has written extensively about the Douly, potential Douly candidacy because of her fondness for the entire state of Tennessee. So it's you should always read Jessica's stuff. And Georgia is a must win for Democrats because they have to, again, hold their own. Let's move to the fourth of the core four states. That state is Maine. Maine Senator Susan Collins is up for re-election. She hasn't officially announced. She, in the past, has waited until December of the year before the election to make that official announcement. Republicans expect her to announce. And based on her previous track record of winning, we have that race rated as tilt Republican. That rating might sound a little odd because Collins is the only Republican senator up for election who represents a state where Harris finished ahead of Trump. So usually that would qualify as a toss-up, but because she has decimated previous Democratic opponents, I think she deserves a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. And Democrats are searching for a candidate. What does that Democratic search look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two sides of the coin of this rating, and one of them is Collins and her own electoral history, her ability to overperform the top of the ticket, outperform the environment, famously, winning in 2020, even as Joe Biden was winning Maine handily, and she was being very much outspent by Democrat Sarah Gideon. But the other side of the coin is that Democrats don't have a candidate here yet, or at least one that they feel comfortable about. There is one guy in the race, Jordan Wood. He's a Democratic campaign operative. He worked for California Congresswoman Katie Porter and has run some pro-democracy organizations. He is not really seen as a particularly compelling or top-tier candidate among folks in Washington, D.C. So the search is still on for somebody with a little bit more oomph to take on Collins. And right now, the speculation is really centered on the sitting governor, Janet Mills, who is nearing the end of her second term in office. She is term limited, and Senate Democrats clearly want her to run. She's popular. She has universal name ID. She'd be able to raise money. It's just a question of whether she wants to run. And, she would be 79, almost 80 at the time of her swearing in. If she were to run and win, that would make her, I want to say, 7 years older than the oldest freshman senator in American history up until then, which was Peter Welch in Vermont. And so it's just a question of does she want to spend her last year as governor and then her 80s in Senate mode? And I think that's an open question. I don't think she's going to make that known anytime soon. And until then, I think you're left with a lot of other Democrats cautiously poking around the race. Nobody really wants to make very much noise at all. The State House Speaker, Ryan Fecteau, is one name that has been floated around. There's a brewery owner, the Maine Brewery Company owner, named Dan Klaben, who has floated his name as well. There's a Native American tribe president, Kirk Francis of the Penobscot Nation, who his name had been out there until he got a DUI, and that seemed to have quieted things down there. And beyond that, I mean, there's plenty of speculation that one of the four Maine candidates, Maine MAIN candidates running for governor of Maine, MAINE, in the Democratic primary will switch races because only one person can be governor. But there are a lot of people trying to do that. So whether that's Angus King III or Troy Jackson or Shenna Bellows or Hannah Pingree, speculation around them will continue as well until Democrats land a candidate here.
Yeah. And if Collins doesn't end up running for re-election, then Republicans don't really have a plan B or C. Collins might qualify as irreplaceable in terms of on the Republican side. So we'll see. Republicans fully expect her to run, but until she says it, we'll see.
She is playing this game now where I think she told the Press Herald up there a couple weeks ago that she fully intended to run, but was not planning on formally announcing anytime soon. I think that she's sitting in this kind of in-between space, but she is fundraising like a Senate candidate, as opposed to some of the other people that we're going to talk about who aren't necessarily fundraising like a Senate candidate. Susan Collins, she raised $2.3 million over the last 3 months, and she has a little over $5 million saved up already. So that's her situation.
And to put it in that perspective of the core four, let's say that Democrats win all of the four core states, which is not a given, not a given that they hold. They've never been able to show ability to defeat Susan Collins, but let's just say that happens. That is only a +2 for Democrats. They need to get 2 more seats. So let's talk about beyond the battleground, what states are there. The first state beyond the core, let's talk about Iowa. Iowa, where Republican Senator Joanie Ernst is up for re-election. She has not officially announced whether she is running or not. There have been some rumors. She's tried to tamp those down. She's now said that Republicans expect her to make an announcement by her big October event in the state. That we have that rated as likely Republican. Part of that rating is because of her comment at a recent town hall, and now it's a couple months old, but a town hall over concerns about Medicaid cuts, which I keep messing this up. We all are going to die, I think was her comment.
It doesn't really roll off the tongue the way that we're all going to die is a natural sentiment, but we all are going to die.
We want to be specific. And then her response with the follow-up video was I think didn't quite strike the right chord. And so Iowa is a Republican leaning state, but there is an opportunity here, I think, that Ernst has created. And there are a bunch of Democrats running. So Jacob, break down the Democratic field quickly for us.
Yeah. And the other thing I would say, right, I mean, this is only the one of several kind of difficult headlines for Ernst. There was a story in ProPublica about her relationships with several lobbyists on the Hill. And, she's faced some frustration from the Republican base about how she handled the nomination of Pete Hegseth to be Secretary of Defense. And all that has inspired a number of Democrats to jump in the race. The first guy in is a former mechanic, a veteran, and currently is the leader of the Knoxville, Iowa Chamber of Commerce, by the name of Nathan Sage. He jumped in first. He was joined by State Representative J.D. Scholten, who is also a minor league baseball player and former congressional candidate in the 4th District in 2018 and 2020, and then by State Senator Zach Walz, who was once the Democratic State Senate Minority Leader and went viral about a decade ago for a speech that he gave testifying in front of the Iowa state legislature. But they may not be the only ones to get in here. There's a speculation about two more candidates. So Jackie Norris, who is the chair of the Des Moines School Board and also a former chief of staff to Michelle Obama when she was first lady. She's looking at getting in here. She would be the only woman in the field on the Democratic side. And State Representative Josh Turk, who represents Council Bluffs, Iowa, he's also looking at getting in. He's got a very interesting story. He has spina bifida, and he is a Paralympian basketball player. So he's won several gold medals in wheelchair basketball with the U.S. national team in that sport.
And I wouldn't say that any of these Democratic candidates are heavyweights in the way that we've talked about Roy Cooper or Janet Mills or some of these big names, but they're Ernst, and the overall feeling on the Democratic side that this could be a good midterm environment has attracted a number of Democratic candidates. And this is a case where the primary might actually be beneficial in terms of for Democrats in trying to get these candidates to get their candidates up to a top level that is necessary to run a competitive United States Senate race. Because I don't think any of them are there right now. But the Democratic strategy, because they have to gain 4 seats overall, 2 more beyond the easiest targets, they have to get as many races in play as possible. And some of the ingredients are there, but so we've pulled it out of our solid category into likely, but we don't, this is not a toss-up race right now.
And the other thing I think that I'll note here, just in Iowa, there's clearly there's something in the water there for Democrats. If you look at the special elections, and we know we don't want to overread too much into special election results, but there have been a number of special elections in Iowa over the first 6 months of the Trump administration, where Democrats have been putting up crazy numbers, 20-point over performances. I think that Iowa is an incredibly white state. It's an older state. I think that if you look at some of the places where Democrats have actually gained ground, quite paradoxically, over the last year or so, it is among kind of highly engaged older white voters. And so if you're looking to try and maximize your coalition as a Senate Democrat, and you're looking at the states you need to win, Iowa, I think, has can be a little bit more attractive perhaps than some of the other states we might talk about in terms of ability to pull off an upset because of the underlying demographics.
As Democrats look for other targets, the other state that we pulled out of our solid Republican category is Texas.
I'm Colin Allred. I've been a lot of things in life, but I've always been a fighter. After playing football at Baylor, I decided to give the NFL a shot, hoping that I could help buy my mom the house that she'd been renting for 20 years. But I went undrafted. I got a chance to go to training camp where I played well, but I still got cut. In a lot of ways, though, I was undrafted in life, too.
John Cornyn doesn't share our values. It's time for a change. Ken Paxton is the conservative fighter they couldn't cancel.
An attorney general who has really led the way, somebody who has been brave and strong, Ken Paxton.
We have Texas rated as likely Republican. That might seem strange because for all of the talk about the purpleization of Texas maybe a decade ago, Texas is still a Republican state. It's more Republican than Iowa, according to our baseline metric, and yet there is an opportunity there. Senator John Cornyn is up for election, but right now he is trailing State Attorney General Ken Paxton in the Republican primary, and Paxton has so much significant political and personal baggage. His wife just filed very publicly filed for divorce recently. That if Paxton is a Republican nominee, that gives Democrats an opportunity where they otherwise would not. If Cornyn was set up well to be the nominee, we wouldn't be spending this time on the race. But because Paxton has a very real chance of being the nominee, that sets up a possibility for Democrats.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and the primary doesn't look particularly close at the moment either. The polling that's out there suggests that Cornyn trails Paxton by 15, 20, 25 points, something in that vein. And I think there's hope among national Republicans, Cornyn allies, that they'll be able to leverage Paxton's many personal controversies against him. But the reality is, people, I think, already know these things about Ken Paxton. This is not news. Obviously, the divorce is new news, but the underlying allegations, he has admitted to extramarital affairs. He was impeached by the Republican-controlled state House. He went on trial in the state Senate. He was acquitted. He quite famously was under federal investigation for years until that wrapped up earlier this year. He has faced state investigations, financial investigations. He nearly lost in 2018 at the general election because of some of the controversies. His opponent in that race ran a great ad against him that was all about how he stole a pen. He stole a pen from a courthouse, and the whole ad was like, Ken Paxton will steal your pens. Vote for me. The guy's name was Justin Nelson, I believe. And he said, I won't steal your pen. And he came within 3 points of beating him. So, yeah, I think that Democrats have an opportunity here if Paxton is the nominee. And, they've got two candidates in the race right now. Colin Allred, who is the former Dallas congressman who ran for Senate last cycle, lost to Ted Cruz by about 9 points. And astronaut Terry Virts, who is a political newcomer, but did command the International Space Station, as well as served as a fighter pilot. The field could grow larger still, right? There are still a couple people who are hanging out on the sidelines. Beto O'Rourke, you may have heard of him, 2018 Senate nominee, 2020 presidential candidate, 2022 gubernatorial nominee. He's been barnstorming the state. I think he was actually in Virginia maybe the other day, or South Carolina. He's been going on a little bit of a national tour. I think he was in DC as well recently. Joaquin Castro, who is a congressman, he's also talked about running. And then the newest name on the scene is State Representative James Tallarico, who is a viral star in the State House Democratic Caucus. He is a pastor. He is very well spoken, and he went on Joe Rogan. So that he's got a good comms team around him because he's gotten a lot of juice out of that interview in the last couple of days. But all of them are also considering joining this Senate primary.
Yeah. So for Democrats to win, I guess the easiest path, which saying easy with this path, it doesn't feel right, but it's, holding Georgia and Michigan, winning North Carolina, winning Maine, winning Iowa, winning Texas. I mean, it just shows how difficult I think the path. There is a path, but it is right now. It's not easy for Democrats, or Republicans are, quick to remind us of that.
No.
Beyond, if we keep on this sort of on the Democratic offensive side, there are a couple sort of opportunities that are floating out there. One of them is Ohio. Ohio is where Senator John Husted is up for election. He was appointed to the seat when J.D. Vance became vice president. Everyone's waiting for former Senator Sherrod Brown, what he is going to do: run for governor, run for Senate, not run for anything at all, and just spend time with his grandkids. That to me is interesting, because if Sherrod Brown gets into the Senate race, we would change our rating. It would be taken seriously, but he just lost. He just lost to Bernie Moreno, and that race was not a squeaker. I mean, it was more than 3 points. So the fact that is sort of where Democrats are pinning some of their hopes on Sherrod Brown. It could be, if it's not Brown, it could be former Congressman Tim Ryan, who has run before, Amelia Sykes, who is a current member for the Akron area. She could get pushed kind of out of her district because of Republican redistricting. The same goes for Greg Landsman in the Cincinnati area. But yeah. Ohio's not a swing state anymore. It is a Republican state.
Yeah, and then I would throw Alaska in there as well. Also a Republican state, also a state where Democrats are trying very hard to get one specific person in the race who would change the game up there, and that's former Congresswoman Mary Peltola. And I think, interestingly, Republicans are clearly paying attention to Alaska. The NRSC recently cut an ad specifically for Dan Sullivan, the Republican incumbent up there, trying to buck up support for his vote for the reconciliation bill. And just today, One Nation, which is an affiliate of the Maine Republican Super PAC on the Senate side, Senate Leadership Fund, included Alaska on its list of states where it was going to advertise in support of passage of that bill. So clearly, Alaska is an odd state. It doesn't always follow the same kinds of rules or political trends. If Mary Peltola were to run there, it would also, be a much more enticing opportunity for Democrats than some of these other places.
And some Democrats that we've talked to when putting together these ratings put Alaska as that fourth seat, right? That 51, that 51st seat. Let's flip the ledger a little bit, because there are two Democratic held seats that we have rated that aren't solid. One of them is New Hampshire. New Hampshire we have rated as lean Democratic. Now, Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen is not running for re-election. The Democratic side quickly consolidated around Congressman Chris Pappas, who already represents half of the state on the House side. The Republican side is still forming, and Jacob will have you talk about that, but I'll just say that New Hampshire has kind of gotten pushed out of the conversation about competitive states overall, meaning it's not Georgia, it's not North Carolina, it's not Nevada or something, but New Hampshire is close from a partisan, has been close from a partisan perspective. So, but what does the Republican field look like against likely nominee Chris Pappas?
Yeah, I think New Hampshire is like Republicans' version of North Carolina, or North Carolina is for Democrats. It's like they can win the governor's race, but they can't win a Senate race or the presidential to save their lives, even though it's always going to be a pretty narrow victory. The Republican field is still taking shape. Scott Brown is the big dog in that primary. He is the former Massachusetts senator, won that famous upset to succeed Ted Kennedy in 2010, but moved to New Hampshire after he lost to Elizabeth Warren in 2012, ran for Senate against Jeanne Shaheen, nearly won in 2014, and has hung around. He was ambassador to New Zealand under the first Trump administration, and he's now running for Senate this time. He doesn't have a clear shot to the primary. State Senator Dan Innes is also running, and there are other folks who are circling the race as well, most notably Phil Taub, who is a private equity lawyer who is personally wealthy and could put some money in there. There are rumors, chatter that perhaps Trump and his allies aren't the most enthusiastic about Scott Brown as their nominee and might want to find someone who is a little bit more MAGA friendly. But it all remains to be seen. And New Hampshire's primary is the latest in the nation, or one of the latest in the nation. It doesn't happen until early September. So we're not just a year away, but we're a year and 2 months away, essentially. So plenty of time in the next 14 months for things to shake out differently in this race and see who ends up facing Chris Pappas in the general.
Right. And the other state that we don't have as solid Democratic is Minnesota. Minnesota is another open seat because Senator Tina Smith is not running for re-election. Minnesota we have rated as likely Democratic, or likely DFL, because the party in the state is the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. But there is and this rating is more about the maybe sneaky closeness. I'll say the sneaky closeness of Minnesota, that it is a Democratic leaning state, but is not Massachusetts or Connecticut or something like that. But it is certainly not because of the strength of the Republican field. Let's talk about that. Then we'll talk about the Democratic side.
Yeah. I mean, Republicans I don't believe that they've won a statewide race in Minnesota since at least 2014, potentially 2010. I think one of those two was the last time that they've won any statewide race. So it's been quite a while. And at the moment, they don't have a top tier candidate in the race. They don't even have a mid-tier candidate in the race.
We're being generous.
They've got Royce White, who's a former NBA player who was the nominee against Senator Amy Klobuchar last cycle, who is a conspiracy theorist. He believes a lot of really crazy things. He lost to Klobuchar by about 14 points last time. He's currently the fundraising leader in the primary. Navy SEAL veteran Adam Schwarzy is also running, but can't seem to raise a dime. And beyond that, conversation has centered around a few potential candidates. Willie Burton, who is another former NBA player, also played for the University of Minnesota basketball team in his heyday. He's talked about running, but he just moved back from Michigan, where he was nearly a lieutenant governor nominee a couple years ago. And former NFL sideline reporter Michelle Tafoya, who has been floated for any number of races in Minnesota over the last couple of years. Her name is also out there. But the more traditional candidates that you would have expected the Minnesota Republicans to put up, people in the vein of Norm Coleman and folks like that who once won these statewide races, Tim Pawlenty, have shown no interest in this race. Coleman's daughter-in-law, Julia Coleman, who's a state legislator, she said she didn't want to run. Senator Zach Duckworth, who is a rising star in the Republican Party there, he's not interested in running either. So it's a very thin bench for Republicans. They've got a couple members of the delegation who might take a crack at it, most notably Pete Stauber, but I don't think that he's really interested in it at the moment. If he changed his mind, maybe that would be interesting. But I think Republicans need to find a candidate if they want to make this race real.
Maybe I don't know what Pete Stauber's wife is doing. I remember when we interviewed Stauber as a congressional candidate, and his wife was with him as part of that, and she was impressive. I believe she served in the military, and I'm like, wait, maybe this could be a family affair. But the key thing to watch right now in Minnesota is the Democratic primary. This, along with the Democratic primary in Illinois to replace Senator Dick Durbin, who's not running, are two I think are going to be fascinating, interesting, because there are multiple candidates and you have lots of different factors going on. But in Minnesota, it's Democratic Congresswoman Angie Craig against Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. And so that's I think the most consequential race in Minnesota right now.
Jod Stabber, who's Pete Stauber's wife, who was, to be clear, has no known interest in running for the Senate. She's the former Commander Chief Master Sergeant of the 148th Fighter Wing, Minnesota Air National Guard, Duluth, Minnesota. She served with the 447th Air Expeditionary Group in Baghdad in her military career. So
there you go. Well,
there you go.
I'm not. Yeah, maybe I will get an excited or an angry phone call from the Stauber family if they're listening to this podcast. So. We mentioned those Democratic primaries. We're running out of time. There are some interesting Republican primaries, such as in Alabama, to replace Senator Tuberville, who is running for governor.
Yeah,
and I would encourage you to read and subscribe to Inside Elections, where we will have this analysis.
Not only something for the subscribers.
Yeah, not only will you get this issue with an analysis, an overview over all of the races. We have blurbs on all of the Senate races in the country, but previously Jacob has done deep dives into these races as well, where I guarantee you're going to get more information than anywhere else. So check us out. And now it's time for our final segment, Look What I Found. This is maybe my favorite segment all the time. And where we talk about anything new that we're into, we've watched, we've seen, we've experienced. Sometimes it's political. Jacob, is it political for you this time?
Well, I got a twofer here because I read two books. I finished two books this week. So it was a big, I didn't start and finish them at the same time, but one of them I did read entirely this week and one of them I finished this week. Very different. One is political. It's called Founding Brothers by Joseph Ellis. It's 6 vignettes about the relationships between the founding fathers. It's really good. It won a Pulitzer Prize, so it's good. But it was just, it's so wonderful to read about the founders and not to get too sappy here. They did some really incredible stuff. Sometimes I think we take it for granted, the systems that they set up and what it involved, but it was a really kind of fun and enlightening look at how messy and unpredictable and personality driven and relationship driven the founding of the country was. So that was one book. And then I also finished a book called The Expat, which is a new book by an author named Hansen Shi, which is a corporate espionage story about a Chinese-American engineer who gets roped into a Chinese intelligence operation to steal automobile technology. And it's one of these books where he just makes bad decisions over and over and over again, and you just feel you want to reach into the page and like shake him by the shoulders and be like, don't do that. And yeah, it's funny, it's taut, it's a quick read. And yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Well, that's right. Just to show the fact that you read 2 books, my mind is blown, Jacob. But I'm just.
I also wrote 10,000 words for the newsletter, so
I'm trying to read Nate Bargatze's book, which I think is a slightly not as intellectually challenging. He would even say he's a comedian if you're not familiar. But also when I was in Indiana with the family, this is not my actual. Look what I found. Hold on, I bought this book that I will probably never read. A biography of the Dulles family. I don't know if you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, it was $1.49. I'm like, you know what? This is the type of book that I should have behind me on a podcast. So I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever read a biography of Eleanor Allen and John Foster Dulles and their family network, but it was too good of a find to pass up. So what did I actually find though? In the last episode, you mentioned that our family was at Cedar Point Amusement Park in Ohio, in Ohio's 9th District, right on the lake. It's an amazing roller coaster park. If you haven't been there, they have a new roller coaster called Siren's Curse. I would encourage you to check it out online. The car, the train, it comes to a halt and then tilts. The entire train tilts downward. It's not a typical hill, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I wrote it. It was fun, but the fear of it is not just the tilting and the drop. Part of the fear is that it has broken down multiple times since it's been open. So when you start that tilt, you're like, are we going to be the ones that are going to be stuck here for 10 minutes or something? So that adds
3
extra
separate
fear.
Stoppages. Including on opening day, and another that required an evacuation from 160 feet. I'm sorry, Nathan. I enjoy a good roller coaster. I would not get on that. 3 stop. It just opened.
No one's dying. I mean, it's stuck. Maybe, yeah. It's you get on it and you do it. But that was a one and done.
I'm sorry. Alan, we're going to send you a photo and show what it looks like when you get stuck in mid-turn on this roller coaster, because I feel like I'm the only sane one on this podcast right now. I would not. You're more adventurous than I am.
Well, maybe in this area. But my favorite coaster, though, well, for this to show how old I am, that the last time I was at Cedar Point, there was a roller coaster that just opened called Millennium Force. So this was the year 2000, and now they're celebrating the 25th anniversary of Millennium Force, which is still a great roller coaster. But my favorite one is Steel Vengeance. And there are different types of this coaster. When you look at it, it looks like a wooden coaster, but the track is metal, and it is so smooth and fast, and you're constantly moving, but you're not going to have to visit a chiropractor. It's really that to me is there's one called Twisted Timbers, I want to say, at King's Dominion, that's pretty similar. But give me that one that looks like a wood coaster, but it's a metal track. I'll ride those. Maybe not all day. I'm getting old. I'll get somewhat sick, but those are my favorites.
No. Okay, no Siren's Curse for me. I'll get like a funnel cake or something.
That's right. Well, and if I wouldn't get a funnel cake before riding Siren's Curse either. That's not it's not a recipe for success. But anyway, well, Jacob, we did it. We don't have a guest to sign off, but thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you on the other side of our break. At Inside Elections, we provide nonpartisan analysis of congressional, presidential, and gubernatorial races. With a combination of reporting and data, we break down the key races and bring valuable context to complex elections. Please go to InsideElections.com, which we are redoing at this moment, but it's still alive. Please go to subscribe to our newsletter. We've got individual subscriptions and group packages that are tailored to boost corporate and association PACs. If you like this episode, please subscribe, tell your friends, listen on your road trips, listen anywhere you go. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribing is helpful. Click the thumbs up button there. If you didn't like today's episode, please email Champ Walker. We also want to thank our producers, Alan Tazinski and Melissa Lenner of Pretty Easy Podcasts, and our associate producer, Conrad Tolosa. I'm wearing the shirt for his band, The Pale Moonlight. You can get that online as well. But please come back and join us again next time.